One of the things we wanted to talk about was the Future Cymru Forum. So I wondered if you could just let our viewers know why that body has been set up.
Okay, well, what we're proposing to set up ourselves, Wales Green Party and Plaid Cymru, is this organisation, this body, Future Cymru Forum. The idea being it will work kind of along the lines of Commonweal in Scotland. It will commission work from academics, economists, community groups, trade unionists, to start to make the case for what an independent Wales could look like, taking the two visions the parties have, and we do have different visions of an independent Wales, but taking our radical vision, especially from our side, and almost stress testing it, getting experts and outside people to look at it and make the case, for the future economy of Wales, the future environmental policy, social policy of Wales, to really explore what a future independent Wales could look like. Because it's one thing, there's that saying that we campaign in sound bites, but we have to govern. That's a bit of an ambitious word. We have to govern in policy. And so it's all very well telling people, and we are the two leading pro-independence parties in Wales. And it's all very well telling people we support independent Wales. People quite rightly what independent Wales would look like. And Wales Green Party, we've been doing a lot of work on that already, and we have some very, very clear ideas. And what's also going on in the background in Wales at the moment is the Welsh Government has set up the Constitutional Commission to look at the constitutional future of the United Kingdom and Wales's place in it. And it's invited, as a political party, we obviously submitted to that and have done interviews with them, as have Plaid and other groups. So there is an ongoing conversation going on in Wales about what do we want the future of Wales to look like. And for some people, that is better devolution, improved devolution. Others, it's independence. And so this is a way of just examining those issues in detail. And because the other thing that comes up quite often when I talk to pro-indie people in Wales, if an independent Wales is just going to mean we move control from Westminster to Cardiff Bay, but it's business as usual, then there's no point. Independence, as we're seeing in Scotland, the argument in Scotland, is a chance to make the case for a new way of doing things, a new radical democracy, a new radical economy. And that's what we hope to explore with this forum. I do need to clarify that at the moment we're in the setting up stage, because basically the leadership, myself and Adam, and heads of policy, discussed this recently and agreed that this is something we want to explore. What we do next is a working group with members from both parties. We'll draw up the terms of reference, a memorandum of understanding, a timescale. We're envisaging a 2-year programme of these papers and events. And that obviously has to go back to both parties' executives before it can be formally launched, because both parties have to agree. So in principle, both parties have agreed this is a good idea. We want to look into this. I'm really excited by it. I'm very confident that it will take off. And I think it will start some really good and timely discussions in Wales. And for me as well, what's exciting about it is it puts Wales Green Party at the heart and centre of the discussion about future Wales. It puts us at the big table. These conversations wouldn't have included us 5 years ago. So it's going to raise our profile. It's going to give so much publicity to our radical policies. It's also going to highlight I'm already finding in sort of initial discussions about what sort of economic discussions we want to have. It's already highlighting that the Green Party's policies are so way out there, far more advanced and radical than other parties. So it's exciting. I mean, it mirrors a lot of what's going on in Scotland with the Scottish Government, the SNP and Greens, putting out their papers on what an independent Scotland would look like. But also at the same time, which I'm quite impressed by and want to emulate, is the Scottish Greens are also doing their own set of papers and what a Scottish Green government would do if they weren't working with someone else. And I think it's the future of politics. It's how politics is done in Europe. This wouldn't raise any eyebrows in Europe, this sort of work. What this is trying to do is to do that important work before an election, rather than after an election, trying to figure out what it was that you meant by independent Wales.
So you mentioned Scotland there. And one of the things that, listeners won't be surprised to hear me say this, but one of the things that's quite clear is that the levels of support for Welsh independence are much lower than they are for Scottish independence. So if you look at opinion polls, in Scotland, you're still seeing opinion polls suggesting roughly somewhere around 50% of the population support independence, 50% are opposed. In Wales, that support figure is much, much lower. So why do you think it is that support for Welsh independence is weaker than it is than Scottish independence is in Scotland?
I think that go back historical sorts of reasons, how the United Kingdom formed, how Wales was assimilated, whereas Scotland chose to join. So there has historically been a stronger pro-independence movement in Scotland. The SNP have arguably been more successful politically than Plaid Cymru, who up until recently the only pro-independence party in Wales, the leading pro-independence party. But it is catching up, and there are other issues, differences of geography. I mean, there's a case, I don't have the figure to hand now, but very high percentage of people in Wales live within 25 miles of the border. Lots of people cross that border daily for work in both directions. So there is a closer interrelation in some ways between England and Wales than there is between England and Scotland. But it is definitely shifting. And just looking at that before I came on, recent polls for Welsh support in Welsh independence are around 30% now. And that goes up to 40% if you just narrow it down to 16 to 24-year-olds. Now, 30% support for independence is where Scotland was in 2012. And that went up dramatically in their independence referendum 2 years later. So I think once this becomes a more tangible, once you start talking about a referendum and it becomes possible, and we see something happening in Scotland, interest will go up. But also I think what's driven it, and it's definitely what's driven the Wales Green Party towards these policies pro-independence, is the absolute failure of Westminster government. And what we're seeing, we're seeing a pushback against devolution. We're seeing a Westminster power grab. Westminster is trying to take back powers. The Internal Markets Bill sort of cripples the Welsh government's ability to do lots of the things that it would like to do. The Shared Prosperity Fund takes that money that we used to get from Europe and puts it in the hands of the Westminster Tory government instead of where it gets spent in Wales. So there's a growing realisation that Westminster isn't working, not just for Wales, it's not working for England, it's not working for Scotland, it's not working for Northern Ireland. And that is only feeding the interest in, and that's why I think these discussions are so important, because for some people, Mark Drayton, for instance, wants Devo Max. He doesn't believe in independence, but he does want them. He is hampered by, oh, this had to happen, my battery's going to go low, so you're going to have to excuse me for a minute. Apologies for my sheer professionalism there. We are making the case that because of the Westminster power grab and people feeling increasingly disempowered in Wales and knowing that things could be done different, looking at other small independent countries. And I think also what played a part was the pandemic. We had, for the first time, people realised that the Welsh government could do things differently. And I think it was a shock to the United Kingdom government as well, that Wales and Scotland could do their own thing. I wouldn't argue that Welsh government necessarily handled the pandemic well. There's a lot of things went wrong, and Welsh Green Party fully supports the calls for an independent Welsh-led inquiry into COVID, but it did underline that Wales could do things differently. So I think there's a strong yearning, and it's also, there's a lot more interest among younger people coming forward. Younger people want a more progressive society. And the reality is, especially when you watch Keir Starmer lately, you can't see that being delivered from Westminster under either Conservatives or Labour. So that's why I think I'm confident we will see an increase in support for independence.
So I'm going to put a couple more questions to you from me before I go to some of the ones in the chat. And just to pre-warn you, the ones in the chat are mostly about the Welsh Greens rather than the Future Cymru Forum in the case for independence. But on the latter, what's the Green vision for an independent Wales?
It's a very long paper, which I'm happy to share. But yeah, our vision is, when people ask me what's independence got to do with the Green Party, we're a party that believes in subsidiarity, we're a party that believes in devolving power to the lowest possible level, so why wouldn't we be in favour of independence? We would take it further, because for someone living in North Wales, Cardiff is as remote as Westminster. And we want power devolved to the absolutely lowest possible level. So our vision is a radical democratic, radical new democracy in Wales, and a small, confident, open, inclusive and cosmopolitan nation, working together with other small nations. What you see, some of the crises we face is the small nations are more agile, they can respond better. And working together, we already have signed up. Wales is a member of the Wellbeing Economy Government Alliance. At the moment, that's still words, but it does highlight the things that could be done. So that's our vision is an independent, sustainable, with a radical new energy policy, radical new economy, working together with other small countries and showing just what society could be like.
So my final question to you before it goes to the chat is, obviously the proposals to form Future Cymru Forum are seeing collaboration between the Welsh Greens and Plaid Cymru, and we've seen this is part of a wider, I guess, program of collaboration between the two parties. So in the local elections just gone, in Cardiff, you had the electoral agreement between Plaid and the Welsh Greens. Do you think that working so closely with Plaid is going to make it more difficult to differentiate in future elections?
Actually, I don't. That's the short answer. I think the Cardiff one was very local. It was an agreement between Cardiff Green Party and Plaid in Cardiff, and it was very much focused on Cardiff issues. And that's been and gone. We got people elected. We got a 17% vote share across Cardiff, which was 2 more than the Lib Dems and only slightly behind the Conservatives. So I think that was a valuable exercise. Future Cymru Forum, as I said, it is two of the absolute red lines. It is not an electoral pact. It's not an electoral deal of any sort. And we won't be issuing joint policy statements. There will be discussion papers. I can take the point that some people have that concern, but what I think, and the point we'll make quite clearly, is it's part of our strategy going forward is to stand in every election at national level between now and the Senedd election and the next council elections. We will be standing against Plaid Cymru in those elections as different political parties, just as the Scottish Greens stand against the SNP. So what it will do, I think, electorally, as I said earlier, it's put us at the top table. You know, we're being seen, we're getting visibility as a party with no Senedd members, with no national elected representation. We will be seen as one of those parties, and I'm seeing that a lot lately. I'm getting invited to speak to people and meet with organisations. I met recently with the General Secretary of TUC Cymru. These sort of discussions only normally happen in election time when they have to talk to everyone. But people are reaching out to talk to us now because they can see Greens in the Senedd, and they can see that we're going to have some say in the future. So while some people might worry that it's blurring the lines, I think it's actually going to highlight differences. You know, going back to our vision of independent Wales, our vision of independent Wales is unambiguously nuclear free. That is going to be a stress test for some members in Plaid's official policies anti-nuclear, but they do have members in the north who contradict that policy. So it's actually going to highlight, it's going to highlight our vision, it's going to highlight our strengths, it's going to highlight where we're working together. And this is very important as well. This was my experience in the Cardiff election. Members of the public outside the political bubble really appreciated, really liked the idea of parties trying to work things out together. So on this level, actually looking at what the future of Wales could be. Because we've had 20 odd years of devolution, and we've got the highest rates of child poverty in the UK, 1 in 3 children. 60% of the Welsh population are probably going to have severe fuel poverty problems in the coming winter. So while devolution has delivered some good, obviously we do need a major rethink. So I'm going off your question on elections here, but no, I don't think it's going to have any negative electoral impact. If anything, I think it will have a positive impact on our electoral results.
So I'm going to go to the chat now. We've had some great questions come in, and they link really nicely to that last point around the electoral prospects of the Welsh Green Party. So some of our viewers might not be aware, but there has been proposed changes to the voting system for the Senedd. And one of our viewers, Philip Davis, has asked, under the new voting system for the Senedd, how many seats do you think that the Greens could realistically win in 2026 in the next elections to Welsh Parliament?
Okay, under the new reforms, not only have they reformed the voting system, they've increased the size of the Senedd to 190 members. The voting reform is much, much more proportional. It's not full STD, which we would have wanted, which Plaid would have wanted, which Mark Drakeford would want. It's as much as they thought they could get past the Welsh Labour Party, Welsh Labour government. And it does discriminate against smaller parties. It's a closed list system. Smaller areas for the list than we've had in the past. When the reforms were announced, Jane Dodds, the leader of Welsh Dems, called me up and said, we need to make a joint statement about how unfair this is. After speaking to several people in comms and elections in the wider party, we realised that is not a good look. We've been going on and on for years that we want PR, and all the public would see is, oh no, that's not the PR we want. So it's not ideal for us, but it does work for us. In the joint constituencies, because they're lessening the numbers of constituencies in Wales down to 38, was it 32? Sorry, 32, sorry. And for the Senedd election, to get this through, they're going to double up constituencies and have a closed list electing 6 people per constituency in that list. Now, I quite often get asked, because the system in Scotland is very similar, is the same as what we've been using in Wales up until now. And people will often say, how come they've done it in Scotland and you can't do it in Wales? The one difference between Scotland and Wales is on their regional list, the DeHont system, they would elect 7 members of the Scottish Parliament. In Wales, each region elected 4. If we were electing 7, I would be a Senedd member. We came 7th in South Wales Central last time. And looking at the new system, doing the numbers, it's a shift of 2.8, 2.7%, a shift of less than 3% in Cardiff would get Senedd member. So I am very confident that we will get representation at the Senedd. To be absolutely blunt, though, we will have to target. We know all about targeting. We know targeting works. We're going to have to be realistic. And I've had this discussion with the Scottish Greens. And the important thing, as we all know, is getting that first one or two, possibly two might be possible, getting one or two across the line. Not only will that mean many more the next time there's a Senedd election, we have the local authority elections the following year after that Senedd election. And building on the breakthrough this year, which was fantastic to see, the hard work that's going to go on in the next 5 years for those local authority elections, to then be boosted by getting seats at the Senedd, will result in fantastic results for Greens across Wales in the following year.
So we have another question this time around local elections. And some of our viewers in England may or may not be aware that there's been changes for the local elections in Wales as well, with local councils being able to use proportional representation for their elections. At the moment, they are run under first past the post, as they are in England. So Sean Thomas has asked, how will Welsh Green Party campaign to get as many councils as possible to adopt proportional representation in time for the 2027 local elections?
It's a bit of a depressing one, this is, because the Welsh Government brought it in as part of their electoral reforms, along with Vote 16 and the new Senedd system. But they've passed the buck on to the local authorities. They've said local authority elections can be run under STV if the council chooses to, rather than the Welsh Government just changing the law so that councils were elected on STV across Wales. So obviously, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Most local authorities are one-party states in Wales. There's been very, very little movement, and it's also for a local authority to adopt STV for the next council elections. It needs a two-thirds majority of the council, and it has to be decided before next November. So there's been very, very little movement on it. I know that the Lib Dems put a motion to Cardiff Council calling for it, which was just roundly rejected. It's something that talking to our councillors about, it's a point to make in the council chamber, calling for this, and other parties like Lib Dems and Plaid will support you on this. We will work with Make Votes Matter as well to push for this, but to be honest, I don't see any of the councils. It's something we will highlight, and we'll highlight their failure to do it, but realistically, I don't see any one of the local authorities switching to STV before the next elections.
And finally, on a completely different topic, I've got a question from Finn White, and it's perhaps timely given the pride flag that you've got behind you with the Welsh Green Party logo on it. So Finn asks, what are your thoughts on transphobia within the Green Party and how you think we can solve it?
We are just on the flag. We had the Climate Coalition Cymru rally in Cardiff yesterday, and we had this as well as our other banners out. And we're packing up at the end, and who's going to take it home? And one member said, well, why don't you have it up tomorrow? So why wouldn't I? So I hope that helps show our attitude in Wales Green Party. Just to be absolutely clear on this, there is no place for transphobia in the party. There's no place for anti-Semitism, no place for Islamophobia. It's like Islamophobia Awareness Month, as we know this month. There's no place for it. It's got, I have members who ask me that why do we tolerate spokespeople speaking openly against policy? Fortunately, people have been removed from spokesperson positions. I think a lot of work has been done behind the scenes. Things are getting better. I can understand some people's frustrations that things aren't moving fast enough. But personally, there is no place for it in the party, and it just should not be tolerated.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Anthony. It's always a pleasure to have you on Bright Green, writing for Bright Green, joining our shows, YouTube channel, everything. So thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you. Deal.